Let me just pick up the whole theme of where we were talking about packing parachutes and about the trust that you inevitably place in somebody. Can I use this as a comparison? By taking a child to your school, those parents are going, I trust you guys to look after my son or my daughter.
Yeah, yeah. We say that to our new parents when they first arrive. We have a new parents meeting and we say, thank you for trusting us. You know, this is a real privilege that you've put in us in choosing the school. And it is a big responsibility because they're going to be with us for 7 years, and that's quite a journey that they go through from being this little 4-year-old all the way to 11, ready for secondary school. So I guess the analogy there is that, all the way through, there are quite a lot of parachutes that need to be fitted to that child, because school has become such a...
They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it has to adapt and be prepared to change.
Yeah. It's constantly adapting. Schools have become way more than just, teaching them how to read and to write and to do their arithmetic. There's a lot more that they need in their parachute than they used to.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's so important. It's not just about I fitted them up with a parachute, because they're now not ready. They've got to have all those skills, and they've got to have all that breadth of skills and that ability.
Yeah, and the hardest thing is convincing the parents that the children are going to become adults. So you're preparing a child for adulthood, not for childhood. So there's a lot of experiences that the children need to go through and solve themselves. We see a lot of parents that won't want their child to experience any discomfort or any challenge or any difficulty, where actually that's the most important things that they're going to learn from, because one day they're not going to have you, the parent, there to support them and to help them. One day they're going to leave home for work, for an apprenticeship, go to university or to college, have to be able to survive on their own. So if they are not ready to become adults, then we haven't done our job as a school or as parents in partnership.
I think and life is a complicated thing to cope with.
Yeah, too right. It is. And because of that, you don't know what you're going to experience. So also, not only do you need to be prepared for certain things, you also need to be prepared for the unexpected, and to know that you can survive it.
That's a theme that runs really strongly through Marines training.
Yeah.
Is all the stuff to do with training to deal with the unexpected.
Yeah. And that is what, life's not going to be a bed of roses, as Mrs. Hitchcock has told me constantly. So you have to have that mentality. Okay, that is a challenge, but don't worry, we can do that.
I think the communication about some of the challenges around that, against all the input that they're receiving as parents and their children are receiving as parents, has now become more complex because of the society that we live in.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of an attitude of like, what are you going to do, rather than what can I do?
Correct.
So it's really important, I think.
It's not, here is your child and it's now your responsibility. They sometimes hand them over and go, okay, it's all up to you, it's your fault.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I said, like one day they are responsible for themselves. So, we have to keep putting it back onto the child. And, it is an interesting example. So lots of parents worry about when their child should walk home from school. And, they ask, like, what age, should that happen? And there isn't a set age. So my mum sent me to walk to school on my own in year 1 when I was like 5 years old. But she didn't just let me walk to school on my own.
She monitored.
She would have trained me to do that. I had 2 roads to cross, and she'd have worked out that I was walking with a friend and all those sorts of things. So the mentality isn't like is slightly different there. It's like she knew I had to do that, so it was her responsibility to make sure I could do that. I think for all of those things that children are going to experience, we have to think, your child has to have in their toolkit everything they need to keep themselves safe.
But I think also in terms of learning those skills, it's like people have cut off or think that you shouldn't be able to do something like cooking at home.
Yeah.
Like won't allow them to touch it because they might burn themselves or they might get hurt.
Yeah, but the thing is, man, they will burn themselves when they're older if they don't know how to do it safely. Yeah, and it's always a case of like, well, What are you going to do, child? Do this safely. You know, what help do you need? You know, there's.
I always used, and in my head, I always kind of rerun it to myself. It's like, for me, riding a bike. When you first start to ride a bike, and I remember, right, trying to help or actually teaching Erin how to ride her bike as she's wobbling down the road. I refused to have stabilizers.
Yeah.
Stabilizers to me were just an impediment, and they became a dependency that they had.
Yeah.
So I got a scarf and wrapped it around her under her armpits and ran down the road. I remember being stopped by a mother and saying, "Where'd you get one of those from?"
Yeah.
I said, "It's a scarf."
Yeah. It speaks to the fact, like, the scaffolds that you give to your child have to be appropriate as well.
Correct.
So I agree. You know, people don't have stabilizers anymore because balance bikes are better because it's the balance that you need. So what scaffolds can you provide to your child that's going to be most useful to them? And it will be different for different children. Some children will need more scaffolds; they'll need them for longer, and that's okay. Or they'll need them in a different way. But you have to have the expectation that your child can ride a bike, or they can walk to school on their own, or they can do these things, they can cook for themselves. The way that you get them there is up to you, but you've got to have that expectation in the first place.
I think actually, when we go back and we've used the word running through it, and my brain, like yours, races at 9 million miles an hour.
Yeah.
The word that I keep coming back to, and it's a fundamental building block, not only about our society, but our relationships, is it's all about trust for me. And my parachute packers is something that I use in my head. So there are some people who I meet and I go, I wouldn't trust you to pack my parachute.
Yeah.
And so therefore my behaviour is modified because of that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I'm not going to take the risk of jumping out and thinking, oh, it's going to malfunction.
Yeah.
Because I don't trust them.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of do that if we're not careful in our society.
Yeah. Trust is an interesting thing, I think, with parents as well, is in that if the child is anxious about going to school, that often comes down to trust, and it's transferred. Yeah. So the safety cues that you give to your child are also really, really important. You know, you have to believe that the school is going to look after your child, because of course we will. You know, doing this for donkey's years, but you can feed into their anxiety or your own anxiety and make things worse if you are untrusting.
I agree. But also I think, and I hear adults say this, and I always get very disappointed. And I spoke to you about it in the car on the way over by thinking, I'm going to give this to young people and they'll break it or they'll misuse it. I've never, ever thought that about anything that they've got. I've always had an expectation that they just need to learn, and I need to help them in various stages about how they're going to learn about doing this particular thing.
Yeah, they really surprise you, I think. We can sometimes dumb down our expectations of what they're capable of. That's really what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the refreshing things that I found, particularly working in primary schools, is all young people are extraordinary and capable of a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah. One of the phrases that, and so Lisa, my deputy, is really good at saying this, is that we can rob children of their learning. We have to be really careful not to interfere in what they're doing, because they lose that opportunity to gain experience of whatever they might be doing. And a good example of this at the moment, we're doing, we talk a lot about oracy at the school at the moment, and children speaking in full sentences, thinking, speaking and writing full sentences. And a lot of children are very good because they'll just know how to point at something, or they'll start speaking and then we'll know what they're going to say because we'll just jump in because we're in a rush. So we're trying to be really good as a school now to wait, to stop and let them have an opportunity to communicate and then help them to say it better, rather than accepting a low expectation of what they can do. They can speak in full sentences. They can handle expensive equipment. They can cook pizzas. They can walk to school on their own. They could do all these things. They're amazing. They're amazing little individuals that their potential is limitless. And sometimes we cap that in our own expectations.
I agree. And if we just change the pace of where we are about school and its relationship with children, I'm going to tell you that last night as I was thinking about it, and I really could become quite emotional about it, because I picked up or I went to go and get a copy of Kes.
Of Kes? Oh, what the novel? Is this what you've got here?
And it's here. Now, I was very, very lucky. I met Barry Hines. Barry Hines came to our school and was on a kind of placement in our school for a whole day.
Yeah.
For those who are unfamiliar with Kes and what it's all about, to me, Kes and what he actually represented, and Billy Casper and what he represented in school, and his dislocation from everything was exemplified all the kids who I was involved in. Yeah. He didn't like school. He hated school. He wasn't being supported. He had no social structure at home helping him. Yeah. He didn't have any help. And in a way, it was always going to be very, very troubled. Yeah. School was always going to be a challenge. Yeah. And I used to spend time with kids who'd been excluded from school, and it just kind of didn't work for them.
Yeah. I don't remember. I haven't read the book. I remember watching the film, but I don't really remember much more than there's a
he was amazing.
Scene in it.
And the bit that really got me to be quite emotional about it was the fact that I realised by reading the book and looking up Barry Hines, who came from Yorkshire and was very much a Yorkshire lad. He was absolutely completely besotted and an avid footballer, and he went off eventually to become a PE teacher, and he came into school. And when he wrote Kes, what was lovely for me and really appealing about Kes is he wrote it in an exercise book using a pencil most of the time. He went through and wrote it, and he wrote it longhand before it ever got published or printed. And yet the characters that he created in this, he was just a fascinating and engaging guy. I can relate because I had classfuls of Billy Caspers. I mean, classfuls.
Yeah, and that's what makes the job so rewarding, and you have to remember that sometimes the difference you make is probably disproportionate for those children that are most disadvantaged, because in some respects, and research kind of like bears this out, is that if you've got kind of a pretty solid home and solid parenting, you're probably going to get on okay whatever school you go to.
Right.
But for those children that perhaps have more challenges and more difficulties, school is going to be the most important thing that you encounter in your life in building discipline, cultural capital, your education skills. And so I think at St. Peter's we do have a really nice ethos around that. We're really kind of nurturing. We do go the extra mile for those children, and it's nice sometimes, even saying it now, just to stop and think about the difference that you do make, because you forget about that sometimes.
You do.
You're just caught up in the day-to-day running of everything else that's going on.
I actually watched something, and let me give you an example of it. I was watching, because I'm not a big football supporter, although I'll watch football, but I am a big rugby supporter.
Yeah.
And there was a guy refereeing a game, because I used to referee at first class level.
Yeah.
So you'd be out there, and I love the physical and mental challenge of managing a game, of being in the middle of a game.
Yeah.
The dynamic was incredible. It was very, very addictive, and every Saturday, and sometimes Saturdays and Wednesdays, I would be refereeing, and sometimes under phenomenal pressure. And things have changed in rugby, and things have changed because I think players are becoming more vociferous, and dare I say it, becoming more verbal and actually talking back and so forth. Disrespectful. So there's a guy who's refereeing a match, and the guy who is the captain of one side is constantly appealing for give him a yellow card or whatever. And at one stage, he stopped the game and he looked at him as he was lying on the ground, and he said to him, every time there's a decision, stop appealing, right? Because it's not part of the ethos of this game.
Yeah. If only we had that attitude with more sports.
Yeah, because his name was Adam Leal. I'll give credit to him, and he's refereed. And great, I thought, when I heard that, and it was actually interesting because I'm involved in a conversation with someone, and they quoted it back to me.
Yeah, we hold the rugby respect ethos up as the gold standard, don't we? And it's a shame that.
And we should do, and we should abide by it. And once it gets disrespected, we finished.
Yeah, we'll look at football. I mean, the kids are seeing football more than they are seeing rugby, and they're seeing all their heroes and the way they roll around on the floor and chat back to the
Cheat.
referees. Well, yeah, there's definitely some cheating. There's a lot of petulance, a lot of tantrums. And you see that. They mimic that on the playground. They mimic that with their parents. They mimic that in the classroom. So, yeah, that's another obvious thing, isn't it? There's so many things that we could be doing in our society, in our country, and our culture to address these issues. It's just...
I think we need to go back and redress an issue, because we've both used the word in conversation, is that I suppose I'm very blessed because of the work that I've been involved in, is to realise that I go into companies and I go into organisations who don't really realise, but they have a culture. They have created an atmosphere, way of doing things.
Yeah.
And I can feel it almost instantly.
Yep. Culture is like, whenever I do work with other schools, with other head teachers, I'm always thinking, is the culture right first? So is it Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for breakfast? There's no point attempting any change unless you've got the kind of culture right. And I've worked really hard on that at St. Peter's. It was a real challenge to get that right. And we have a really fantastic culture there. It's very positive, very solution focused. Everybody wants to improve themselves. But if you don't have that in place, then you can't do anything.
It spreads actually even into the high street. And when I work in retail, in particular, or hospitality, I say to people, you can feel it from the moment that you walk in.
You absolutely can. It's so tangible. I go to so many different schools. You can tell whether the culture of the school is positive or negative. As soon as you walk in the door, it's the way the receptionist communicates with you. It's the way the other staff either put their head down and avoid looking at you, or they want to engage you in conversation. It's how happy the children are. Mm-hmm. How well are they engaging with each other? How hard are they working?
It's the way they speak to you, the tonality of their voice.
Yeah, everything.
Hello, good morning, or oh, hello.
Yeah.
It's everything.
It's how they play with each other. It's how the adults are modelling that. Culture is so underrated, but it creates a dysfunctional organisation if you don't have that. And it goes beyond just being nice to each other. It's being aligned behind a really strong vision. That's the first thing that's really important. Like, is everybody subscribing to the point of us all being here, and then being good communicators. And the thing we've already said today is just constantly over communicating certain things.
But this thing is, behaviour breeds behaviour. In a sense, if they see it and they see it modelled in that particular way, that's what they emulate, and that's what they begin to like. So some of the role models that they're looking at are clearly very wrong and are abusing their power or their position.
Yep. We see this, we role models in sport, in politics, but also in the way that we interact with companies. There's this sort of like Amazon culture where if you don't like something, you can send it back without any kind of like recourse. It's just too easy. And it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't just be able to, just because we complain about something, shouldn't mean that we get our own way.
Mm-hmm. I remember going to America and spending some time in America working in a shop. It's ostensibly a shop. It's a chain of supermarkets run by a family called Stu Leonard's.
Right, yeah.
And it is one of the most famous in the world because it's got a great big rock outside of it. And carved on the rock, it says, "The customer is always right."
Yeah, yeah.
And underneath it says, if you think any different, I don't think it says that if you think, well, rule one is the customer's always right. Number two, and if you don't think that, please reread rule two, which is, reread 1-1 and keep going. The customer is always right. And I watched in this store, so you have to imagine, I'm going to America with a bunch of guys who come from a completely alien culture.
Yeah.
And we all arrive, all sort of suited and booted, and they're all being very, very casual and so forth. And the store manager came out to greet us, to walk around his store. The most incredible experience I've ever been in.
Yeah.
This guy is a tall black guy with a very pronounced moustache, and he goes back into the store. And the music is playing, and he's kind of dancing to the music, and he's dancing with customers in the aisle as you walk around this store. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go to Tesco's or I'm going to go to Sainsbury's because it's so different. He's
yeah.
interacting with the customers all
Yeah.
the time, and particularly the kids. He goes down, gets on their level, and I watch people talking to kids, not realizing how big you look, and realizing that kids are at this level and that they go down and they actually speak to them.
Getting down to the level is an important little strategy, definitely. Yeah,
Absolutely, so critical. Because
but don't you think that? I think the thing with the customs always right is being abused
completely
by consumers. 'Cause I think that works for the company in terms of like we need to listen to our clients, and that's going to guide us to what we do. But I think consumers have got hold of the idea that they're always right. So if we don't get our way, we'll just complain.
I don't say this to you because I don't want to be political, but I also think the lack of respect sometimes demonstrated by people in our society towards the institutions like schools is really worrying.
Yeah. And I've said already, we look at the research of this at St. Peter's, and it's not just for schools, but for all public institutions. It's at an all-time low. It's like just reflects society, I think, rather than the fact that schools, aren't inherently worse. In fact, the schools are the best they've ever been. We've got a school system, despite all our challenges, the best it's ever been. So why should parents respect schools less? It's alarming, I think.
It is alarming. It is alarming we've got to a stage like that. And also, if we go back, let me pick up on a couple of themes. First of all, about literacy and about reading and accessibility of books and habits and growing habits around literacy.
Yeah. What would you like to know?
I'd like to add to it. That if we were to encourage anything at all, it's about parents and carers and so forth reading with children.
Yeah. I've got a lovely example here from my family, like my cousin Kate. When her daughter Bella was born, I said that the number one thing you have to do is read to Bella every single day. It will make the biggest difference to everything that she does. And she stuck to it religiously. And Bella's just gone into junior school now, and she's doing fantastically well. But Kate will remind me every opportunity. She says, "Steve, that advice was just the best advice you ever gave me." And every tour I do when I take new parents around the school, I say to them that the number of words your child knows is the best predictor of how well they're doing life. This isn't just my opinion. This is what the research will say. I say not just how well they do at school, how well they engage in relationships, how well that they will how well they're doing their jobs and everything. So the more words that you can put into your child, the better that they will do in everything. And I think the difficult thing is, I think a lot of parents and families will have been put off reading because they've been made to do it. So unless you can find a hook, it's really challenging. So this isn't the right analogy, but I it's the best one I can use at the moment, is that we try to make sure our library is like it's like drug dealing books.
Right.
We try to get them addicted by finding books that they really, really like. So the children in our school know that they can ask for a book on anything and we will buy it for them, because we know that that's really, really important. So if we can't find a book that they like, we're not going to get them into reading, because they'll just be put off. If they can't read in the first place, then there's no point us having a library. So get them to read really quickly. By the time they're 5, let's make sure they can read fluently. Then they can read anything that they like.
It's quite interesting, actually, and I'm not ashamed also, if I did nothing else with my so-called, they're not called it anymore, they're not called fifth-year boys, but they were coming up to be 16. Most of them in the area that I taught in were just like Billy Casper, because they were going to go down the pit.
Yeah.
Right. That was their destination. And in fact, if threatened about anything to do with their future, they'd look at me and go, "Oh, I'll be all right, I'll go down the pit."
Yeah. And I think a lot of parents have gone through a school system where that have had to read some awful text for their English literacy exams. And I remember having to read Far from the Madding Crowd, which as a teenage boy was just so wrong. It was just not right. And I think that really did put me off reading for a bit. It was only when I got back to university and my friend was like, "Come on, here's some good books to read." And I got hooked back into fiction and things. that I got back into it. So if you're in a family where the parents aren't reading themselves, then it's really hard to get that instilled into the children. And I enjoy nothing more than the way that I can intentionalize is just get lost in a book. I read so much, but it's an escape for me. You can go off into another planet.
Well, you have to feed your elephant, don't you?
Yeah, but part of it, is also feeding an itch that I might have. I'll read something because I'm really interested in it. I'm desperate to find out about this topic. So I'll get, I've just read a lot about Egypt, for example, just because I fancied learning a bit more about Egypt. It serves no other purpose for me than just to scratch an itch about history. So it's hard, isn't it, when families aren't used to using reading for their own purposes to get children addicted is challenging.
For example, I would argue the other side of it is access to that is so readily available, whether it be online or in libraries. It's there, and you almost like that sort of thing. So, for example, I can go down to the library and I can book a book that I want to actually get them to get, and they'll get it for me.
Yeah. And we've adopted that strategy in our library at school. So we used to have a checking in and out system, and chasing after people for books and things. We don't do that anymore. We just say, come in and take a book. Mm-hmm. Please bring it back, because that's a respectful thing to do. But we're not going to get hung up if for some reason it doesn't.
The preciousness of this is extraordinary. I can't emphasize to people enough. I used to take this book and sit with my 5th year lads who are now 16, about to go down the pit, and I used to read to them. I used to sit there and read to them. Sometimes for 40 minutes. They were absolutely besotted and engaged with what it was, because the narrative in the book resonated so strongly with them. Somebody against hardship, against what he was going to do, because his brother, Judd, works down the pit. And they talk about it and so forth. And I look at what they're doing and about what they're doing. He spoke their language, and that book speaks their language. And there is a book out there which speaks everybody's language and engages almost everybody.
Well, I go further to just kind of resonate or add to what you're saying there, is that book took you through a threshold, didn't it, I think? And there are so many books that are out there that can enable you to go through a threshold in your thinking. You just have to be able to be determined to seek it out. And I'm not just talking, it could be that self-help books are obvious ones, aren't they? Everyone looks at those, but there's lots of other books out there that can take you through that. And another author's point of view on the world is a really good way of doing that. Mm-hmm. Expand your horizons, your way of thinking. And I've there's so many, just going to the classics is really an obvious way to get started on that, isn't it? There's so many books I've read that just open your mind, wow, mind blowing.
But I also think in that consuming information as we do now, because there's so much data out there, because the era that we're moving into is the proliferation of data all over.
Well, and also it takes an effort to sit down and sustain concentration and attention on a book, whereas we're very trained now to sustain attention for about, 30 seconds on a video. So a bit of self-awareness, I think, around how we digest and engage with our media is also important, to know that you have to train yourself to get into a habit of reading a little bit every day, and to be able to build up to read through a whole book. It's a lost skill, isn't it?
I actually treasure that. That's a very precious book to me.
Yeah.
It's very precious because associated with it is a world that I lived in for quite a long time.
Yeah, you have an emotional connection to it.
It's extraordinarily emotionally connected.
But what kind of a connection do we get to videos that we watch? Not much. They last a really short space of time.
I can consume those at such a rate.
Yeah.
I can sit and watch, for example, podcasts have become like that, or other people's conversations.
Yeah.
But I think the ability to hold a coherent and cogent conversation has diminished over time. People don't talk to each other.
We also don't get the cues like we used to. So in the past, to consume the news, you'd read a newspaper. So you'd read it, and once you'd finished, you could close it, and then you'd go and do something else. It's the same with with some of the television programs. Like I remember watching like Harry Enfield, and you have to wait for a week for the next one to come out. But once it's finished, you go and brush your teeth and go to bed. Now you have unlimited access to as many things you want. So it's very hard to have that cue to stop doing something and go and engage with other things,
Well,
which
also
include speaking to humans.
but they also cannot they can't keep up with the rate of having to reproduce this stuff over and over and over again. It's quite interesting because there's a little piece which I'd never read before until last night. It's called Afterword at the end of it, which he wrote. He wrote 10 years after he completed the book. And he talks about the process of taking this book to be published. And of course, Loach, who was involved in staging the Olympic Games, he was heavily involved in the film.
He was, wasn't he? Yeah.
And he talked about when they first submitted this, how many of the people wanted to change the ending. They wanted to change it. And he stood up and said, no, you're not going to do that.
Yeah. I like books like that when you get like a little bit of extra behind the scenes.
It's like 10 years. And the bit and why it resonated so strongly with me is that I thought, well, he was older than me then when I first met him and I was teaching, and he was doing this to actually doing his training to become a teacher. He was at Loughborough he came to do his teaching and he ended up going back as a PE teacher right from Loughborough. And his big thing was playing football and being involved in football. So he was a real footballer. But he was also exactly 10 years older than me.
Nice.
And then I read, and it kind of hit a nerve with me last night. He died at exactly the same age as I am now.
Oh.
And I don't know why. That sense of you don't appreciate it when you've got it, and that sense of mortality, I think is something we all need reminding of.
Yeah. Memento mori, remember you are mortal. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's scary though.
I think so. And I think in that sense, I think trying to get that energy to constantly and continuously get back out and do what you're doing and so forth requires a lot of effort.
It does. It really does. Yeah. And I think one of the strategies as well around that is like you know you're going to have ups and downs, so it's trying to treat things with indifference as well, so that you can make it manageable. Because there's it can be pretty intensive. So trying not to feel like it's a roller coaster also makes it manageable.
Do me a bit of a favour at this stage, and because as we drove over here, you were explaining to me that during COVID, because we could look at some of the political issues which are afflicting us at the moment, and us were trying to recover the situation out of COVID, because it blighted the education and the progress of so many children.
Yeah, it did. Well, what would you like to know? So what it was like, first of all?
No, well, for you, what was it like? It must have been really stressful.
It was a really challenging time, very surreal time, really, really challenging. There was a lot of anxiety that a lot of people were gonna die, and for teachers, and this is I think what kind of like misses the headlines sometimes, is that we were all scared.
Yeah,
we were really scared. I mean, it's all very well saying schools needed to be open and the children coming in, but you know what made it different for teachers that everyone else was at home and we were stood at the front line. So you had enormous amounts of anxiety from staff, enormous amounts of anxiety from families whose livelihoods were being massively affected. And the pressure on schools to take children in but keep everyone protected was just weighing very heavily on my shoulders.
The bit that suddenly people realise is that child care element of being in school, which they suddenly had to compensate for or do.
Yeah, that we're just trying to teach your own child is difficult for lots of different reasons. I mean, parents aren't typically trained educators anyway, so you're expecting them to teach when they don't necessarily have those skills. But also, it's different when their child is in school. Because when your child is in school, they follow the social norms of being in a school. They behave differently for their teacher than they do for their parent. So you have all this anxiety going on at home. The children probably not really up for doing much learning. and we know that lots of it didn't kind of happen in the way that we wanted it to. So yes, you have this enormous burden on your shoulders at that time to try to manage everything that's going on, to keep education going, to keep everybody sane, to keep everyone safe. We were delivering enormous amounts of food out to people as well to make sure that they weren't struggling. We were communicating efforts in the community to check everyone was okay. And then we were completely bereft of leadership. And, at that time when we needed good decision makers, strong leadership, we constantly saw that they didn't know what was going on, what they wanted to do, and flip-flopping between lots of different things. It was just not helpful. It created chaos, and many times I was shouting at the TV as we found out things at the same time as the rest of the nation about what was happening in schools. So it was an absolute disaster. But
I think what's even worse is hashing it all over again and having an inquiry and watching the visible and public ineptitude of those people who had responsibility for that leadership.
Yeah,
I'm being political.
Yeah, it was terrible. The leadership from the DFE and from Downing Street was not acceptable, and they should be held to account for that. It didn't need to happen in the way it happened. But following that, going back into school, what was even more, I think, disappointing was the complete lack of ambition to support children in schools to recover. So it doesn't get talked about, Martin, at all.
No.
There is no recognition.
So it's like you've deprived these children of this, and now somehow you've got a responsibility of actually re-fulfilling that deprivation that they've suffered.
Yep.
And how do you do that?
Well, the thing is that the part of the disappointment is it's not just like an academic deficit that we're suffering. We're also suffering from the effects that it's had on society as well. So the increases in anxiety that we've had from in families, the cost of living increase, it's kind of been multiplied. But nobody is ever willing to go back to say, like, this has originated from the pandemic. It's almost like everyone's pretending it didn't happen. And so, I don't know. It feels like it's not a conspiracy. I don't know what the right word is. It's just people are in denial about the whole thing. And even like as a family, we don't always talk about it because it was a really weird time. But maybe at some point the whole nation will need to unpack. What happened.
It must have been incredibly stressful for you.
It was so stressful. It was just the strangest time, that just having the burden of having to take on board everything that was going on and to keep everybody safe and to try to keep education going on was weird. And I also think it also showed schools at their best. That ability to respond and be the hub of the community, to look out for not just its young people but its families as well. I mean, I remember we're just going to collect children to take them to school, going out at lunchtimes, delivering food parcels to families, on the phone, giving lots of advice to parents about how to support their children. The classroom teachers just organising not just the academic learning for the children, but on the phone to the parents to check in with our children to make sure they're okay. It was enormous effort, and probably has and won't ever be recognised how well schools did that. And the same with NHS. The NHS were absolutely phenomenal through all that as well. So yeah,
we stood out and clapped for them.
Yeah, and then they didn't get a pay rise. It's like, what? Actions, not words. You've got to watch what your politicians do, not what they say. But no, so we're definitely in a situation now where children are playing academic catch up, and really in an ideal world, you'd want the government to be giving more money and resources to enable that, but they're actually giving less.
I'm going to be a bad boy and I'm going to break my own personal discipline, because I need to take all that we've talked about and then span over, because this is the immediate stepping stone into how Budley Connected actually started.
Yes.
How did it come about?
Yeah, so during
And
the
I didn't realise it was you who actually termed the phrase Budley Connected.
Yeah, so we had a COVID support group which I headed up. So I got the all of the kind of statutory organisations in the town to kind of come together, to work together to make sure we were supporting our community, and we worked really well together. It was a really nice group that we had, and so people in Budley might remember some of the things that happened like that, some of the communications that came through, some of the support packages. You know, lots of good things happened from that group. So afterwards, my intention was to kind of like utilize that to kind of to continue to do some more good. And so working with Mark and Godfrey in particular, we were thinking about, you know, ways that we could develop the connections that started there, and grow it into something that would benefit our community all of the time. And the vision that I had was that, you know, there will be people in Budley that go through some really good times where they can kind of give back to their community, and there will be undoubtedly times when there are difficult times when they'll need the support of their family. And every family goes through that. So being able to kind of connect people together when they most need it is really important, and also to be able to do that kind of altruistic thing of giving to your community was really important as well. So we created this kind of vision around that, and Mark is taking that on now with some funding and some further ideas, and we certainly do have, I think, a community that is very good at giving and supporting, but we just felt that it could do that even better. There's so many kind of multipliers of organisations and people that could enable it to happen in a more effective way.
I need to run like a little advert at this stage by saying that I've been delighted to work with Mark at Sea Change and develop the whole concept around a digital studio, which he would provide the accommodation for.
Yeah. And Sea Change, and Mark, who everyone knows will run Sea Change, is just such a fantastic organisation.
It is amazing. What's amazing is, we talked about it earlier, is I went to see Mark. In fact, I kind of bombed him one afternoon at a garden party when he was inviting all these people, because I thought it would be a great time to catch him.
Yeah.
And I begged for 5 minutes of his time to pitch the whole idea of coming onto my podcast.
Yeah.
And he was highly receptive.
Yeah.
He was really good.
Yeah. He's great. I mean, I think probably a certain demographic will use Sea Change more than others in the town, probably the older demographic. But if anyone's been up there just to see how vibrant it is and how many good initiatives they've kind of put on there, I think they're fantastic. I mean, they do a great job. I think, you know, we talked about the library, how good they are at connecting people, and the medical practice as well. There's
But
so
we
many
need to
good
get
things.
the town council involved as well. My appeal is, please, town council, be involved, because Budley Connected is at the real heart about what this community is about.
Yeah, and having a really good plan for the neighbourhood and for the community about bringing people together and utilising what we've got is really important. And also the businesses in Budley, supporting them is really important as well. So we've got an enormous number of clubs to utilise, different groups as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on in Budley that could be more joined up.
It's such a significant opportunity, and I'm really looking forward to being involved in it.
Yeah.
So let me just finish on this particular challenge to you. So what are your biggest challenges ahead? I know you've got half term coming up where you have to give them a hoot a rest and also the elephant a rest.
Yeah. Good question. I think there's probably two ways to think about this. So philosophically, there's always going to be challenges, because that's now the nature of my job. So I probably should avoid thinking of it too specifically, if that makes sense, because it will make me go into this is all too much. Having said that, there are some very obvious challenges that don't get talked about enough. And there's a bit of a storm kind of brewing around this. So the government needs to think about how education works in this country. So we have issues with our curriculum because it's overcooked. There's too much to teach, and it doesn't suit all children. There's issues with special needs education because it's the model that we currently have is costing too much money, frankly, and it's not working for anybody. We have issues with the inspection framework. So Ofsted have basically produced an inspection framework which is going to be quite damaging in lots of different ways. There was a head teacher that took her life a couple of years ago based on an Ofsted inspection. So they're supposed to be changing it to make it more humane. They've actually made it worse. So that needs addressing. And then there's the constant ongoing issues with funding. So we, as a country, we spend a lot less than similar countries do. When we look at GDP. And we also have seen a decline in real terms over the last 15 years and how much is spent as well. So we're squeezing the funding in education while costs are going up, which is not a new issue. It's been going on for a decade or so. But it's a perfect storm of all those things are contributing to a very uncomfortable sector at the moment. And a lot of schools are suffering because there's too much work to do, not enough resources, and the work isn't really around like what goes on in the classroom. It's everything that goes around outside that, supporting families and almost safeguarding issues. There's a lot of kind of mission creep as to what schools are facing. So philosophically speaking, it's just our job now to manage, get on and deal with the cards that we've been given. But specifically speaking, there's an enormous amount of issues that need to be grasped quite firmly.
Let's just finish on one particular story, which you told me when I first met you and talked about doing this, was that your daughter went to university, not only to go to university, but she chose a specific discipline.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Yeah. So she decided when she was doing her GCSE, she wanted to be a physio. And the reason she decided that is because she saw the difference it made to me when I had my stroke. So I had this amazing team of physios that basically visited me at home every day for 3 months to teach me how to use my paralysed side. And she was only little, but it really kind of struck her. And so she'd been thinking a lot about a job that she could do. She's really academic. She's really clever, bless her. So she could choose anything. And she thought, wants to do something where she can make a difference. So she's gone for that, and she's really enjoying it. So she's telling me this week she's been to the hospital. They've seen some lots of specimens in jars, and also she said, I saw my first torso and head this week, Dad. I was like, wow, blimey. So so I'm really pleased that she's being able to do something that's going to make a difference to lots of people and lots of different walks of life.
But she makes a difference because of you.
Well, she's I guess she's been inspired in a weird way to do that because of what happened to me. So it's really pleasing for me that she's chosen that, because there's not many better professions, I think, than being able to do something that's for the good of everybody. So our public health services, our education systems, those sorts of things, I think are really valuable.
It's been great. It's been lovely talking to you, Steve. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on. It's just,
pleasure.
As you know, I can talk for England, so
okay.
It's been an interesting experience.
Okay.
Thank you.
Two like spirits. Okay. Right. That was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.